Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real genuine pleasure to be here, and I'd like to spend, I thought I had 20, but maybe 15 minutes, but really look forward to have the opportunity to speak with you. And to speak with you about digital transformation, because I've been in the industry now for just about 40 years, and I've never been more excited about what's going on in the industry at this very point in time, because literally the world is changing. And when we say that, there was an article in The Economist not long ago, and it was referring to the city of London by the year of 1900, and that was the advent of the combustion engine really getting some market acceptance. At that point in time, they needed 300,000 horses to keep the economy in London going. That was 300,000 horses that delivered transport goods back and forth, the manure needed to take care of, the horses needed to take care of, and it was underpinning the entire economy. By 1917, the last taxi service using horse and carriage was shut down in London in 17 years. So imagine 300,000 horses underpinning the economy in a 17-year period, and that was sort of the second industrial revolution. Today we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and we tend to think of it as mobile first, cloud first. We know where it's all going, and we know what the current reality looks like. And what is the vision that we can outline to help us navigate through that? Not unlike the metaphor with London by the year 1900. So by 1955, out of the Fortune 500 companies, how many of them do you think did not make the cut of being in the Fortune 500 by the year of 2017? Anybody want to have a guess? How many of them did not make it? 5%? Well, 89%. 89% didn't make the cut. So the transformation, and there's some good commentary around this, because when you look at how you embrace change and how you deliver value and draw value from change, the irony is that when the outside of change moves faster than the inside of change, we're in serious trouble. Think of it as a consumer. Think of the kind of devices you're using as a consumer, and you come back to the office. And if the office environment is not at the standard what your home environment is, you're probably in trouble. So how to draw value from cloud, and how to navigate and to make the journey from where you are today and where we need to be to deliver value. The good news is all of that is made available by some severe investments made by a number of companies and by the industry, and literally the entire world is becoming interconnected. I had an opportunity to sit on a panel yesterday, and I heard some numbers being thrown around in terms of Internet of Things. That was the subject of the panel. And we had numbers from 20 billion devices by the year 2020 to 30 billion devices, and the last one was to 34 billion of devices. So I'm not going to argue where it's going to land. The point is, it's all happening, and it's happening right now. The digital economy is here. How you embrace it and how you put it to good use is extremely important for society as a whole. And part of the subject is around what we're doing around cities. But think of it in the following way. So the very mission that Satya Nadella, our CEO, has laid down for Microsoft is around looking at people, looking at organizations, and finally looking at industries and how it all comes together. And the mission is for us to empower every individual and organization on the planet to achieve more. And to give you some insight to that, when we launched Windows 10, which you would think is a pretty big deal for Microsoft, where was Satya Nadella? He was in a school in Kenya, linked up to a school in India, and did the launch of Windows 10. That was a way of sort of sending a signal to the world that for us is to empower every individual on the planet to achieve more. So we've laid down 3 bold ambitions to be able to do that. We talk about generating more personal computing. So giving the tools available to individuals to be able to create and generate the work they need to do by giving them the type of devices they need to do. This is where the Internet of Things and connecting to sensors and connecting all these devices. When you've got programmable logic units sitting in elevators that are all in terms of preventive maintenance, are all linked up to the net, and it's all getting connected, whether it's refrigerators in the consumer space, or whether it's pipelines in the oil and petroleum space, it's all becoming interconnected. So generating more personal computing is the first bold ambition of Microsoft. The second bold ambition of Microsoft is to reinvent productivity and business processes. Think of it this way. For the time that I've been in the industry, I joined the industry in the mainframe days. We put layers and layer and layer of technology out there. We've been good at adding new layers. We haven't been particularly good at cleaning up behind us. So reinventing productivity and looking at how you can streamline processes and draw more value from technology, that is going to be extremely important. It's something that we put a lot of effort into. Office 365 in the cloud is an example of reinventing productivity. The third one, and perhaps the most interesting one, is building the intelligent cloud. So we've spent billions of dollars. We're now building 5th generation data center capacity that we make available for people to innovate on top of. So we are, by definition, a platform company. There are tons of innovative companies that are building solutions, drawing value from cloud services, and deliver that. So mobilizing the local software economy, and I was in Bangalore last week, and I met with some ISVs, really, really smart ISVs that are doing exactly that. They don't have to worry about building a data center. They don't have to worry about networking. They really don't have to worry about security. We'll take care of that. But the innovative layer that sits on top of it and how you package that and how you deliver that as a service, that becomes really profound. And that's how you can get to the speed of change and you can deliver value to the market. So here's an example of the amount of information that now sits and is available there. Getting value from open data, getting all these different kinds of sources together where you safeguard privacy and you look to security to guide you through these challenges. But the amount of data that is being produced in the last 3 years, about 90% of all the data that exists in the world was produced in the last 3 years. It's huge. So getting value and getting insight from that and how we turn all that into useful information to make well-informed decisions and to deliver services that we need. And why do we need that? When you think of, take an example in Japan. In Japan, 30% of the Japanese population are now retirement age, 65 plus. By the year 2100, Japan, in the current trajectory, will be 60 million people. They're currently 122 million people. If we don't have healthcare systems and social systems and technology to help us meet those challenges, we're going to be in trouble. So it's a race. It's a race to the bottom in terms of finding new ways and innovative ways of connecting these devices. And there are tons of examples. You can move in just about any kind of direction. I know in the audience here today we have government officials, we have people from the private sector. All of us can draw value from this, and there are so many different examples that I can talk to you about. And what I would like to do is to point to a couple of examples here in India. But based on my conversation that I had last week, let me point to a company that I don't have a slide for, but it's very fresh. Dr. Assist is a small, innovative, independent software vendor based in Bangalore that's put together a value proposition where they diagnose 39 different kinds of cancer. They do it at 10 times the speed by doing cloud services from what they used to do. They're delivering this at a cost per diagnosis that used to be 3,000 rupiah down to 500 rupiah, which means it becomes much more affordable. Moreover, the quality of the diagnosis is increased from 60% accuracy to 95% accuracy. So you're talking about real value here. When you then took that into where do you take from next from diagnosis and the predictive analytics that you can do in terms of helping solving many issues as it relates to cancer. It's just an example. The Eye Care Institute here in terms of cutting cost. Whatever they do today, they can do at 40% less cost than they did do before by using the cloud services to do it. Another one, which is an interesting one, is Andhra Pradesh government in terms of what they do with predictive analytics at schools. Making sure that you can put the intervention of a child or, what we're talking about here is pretty large in terms of scale. You're talking about 6 million students being able to get predictive analytics on their performance at schools. 6 million students, by the way, is more students in Andhra Pradesh than there are people living in Denmark. So that's the sheer scale of thing here. But the notion is that when teachers can provide an intervention at the right point of time, think of the value to society and the value to the individual of being able to take that right step at the right time when they needed it, because we could anticipate what was going to happen by the use of predictive analytics. So predictive analytics, machine learning, all those technologies that are typically available only in the cloud because of the hyperscale of the cloud and the type of computing power you need to do that kind of analytics, it only lives in the cloud. Nobody would want to prefer to try to do that on premise. But the point that I also like to make is that I'm the first one to recognize where we're coming from and the data centers that we have today and the technology that we've invested today. So the good news is, if you developed on Active Directory and you use Windows Server, and I'm doing a bit of marketing here for Microsoft, but you work on the full stack. You have the full stack available to you today, and you move to the cloud, you use exactly the same skills and capabilities. So the investments that you've made, you preserve your investments in the technology and the skill, and as you move to the cloud, here's the deal. You move to the cloud because it typically is going to run at a significantly lower cost of the cloud. But if a policy change, and you need to take the workload back on premise again, you can. You've got a return ticket. And you've got the skills within your organization to do it. So the journey to the cloud is inevitable. That's where it's all going. And as we move, so the restrictive forces of making that move to the cloud, I would point to a few things here in terms of privacy and security. Until we know that it's secure, people are going to feel very reluctant to move their workloads to the cloud. Ironically, you're probably more vulnerable on premise than you would be on the cloud. But helping you navigate through those challenges of saying, which workload can I move to the cloud, whether it's policy restricted, or whether it's financially restricted, or it's technically restricted, all of that can be resolved. But what I would put to you and what I would submit to you is that we take both privacy, so we work along all the lines of respecting local laws and local policies across the world. We tend to refer to it as we give you cloud on your terms. And as we do, when you think of the work that goes on in security, Microsoft has invested substantially in what we call the Digital Crimes Unit. So we actively fight crime at Microsoft. So out of the 17 botnets that's been taken down in its history, Microsoft was involved in taking 14 of them. And for those of you who are not familiar with botnets, it's a way of organizing millions of computers without the consumers knowing they're engaged in crime, to literally use that to steal money and resources from others. Some people suggest that we're living in a world where the biggest wealth transfer of stolen IP is happening as we sit here today. And the notion of Microsoft being the most targeted environment outside of the US Department of Defense of hackers, we even pay prize money for having the smartest hackers to try to break into our data center. And that's our guarantee that we want to be ahead of the game. And you know, the way that the security world works, people go to the path of least resistance, where they will seek out your vulnerability. Whether it's a zero-day vulnerability, when you're typically out of 1,000 lines of code, you would have 20 bad lines of code. Whether they're trying to exploit that particular one, that's a hard one. That's a really, really hard one, and that may be a challenge to a hacker. But typically what people do, they go for the path of least resistance, and they look for vulnerabilities. And in today's environment, if you're using old technologies, so when you think of Windows as an example, think of Windows as a service, not Windows 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, sequentially. Think of it as Windows being delivered as a service. So the investment that we do, as an example, if you give me your IP addresses, I can tell you exactly what malware lives on each one of those IP addresses, and we can help you clean it up. So the commitment from our side is that we go out and search and look for everything that goes onto the net so we can present a service through the cloud, which is secure, and it's like the Fort Knox, and it's the state of the art in terms of security. So that's our commitment to security, but make no mistake, 60% of security breaches are done by internal personnel within your existing organizations, and that comes back to policy in terms of who's got access to what and who's able to deliver what. So what I think is really important here is that we think about the very notion of privacy and security as an underpinning for how this all comes together. And as I said at the start of my talk, I've never been more excited than I am at the moment what technology has in behold for us. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But when I look at what we see today and the investments that we're making today, billions of dollars of investment in building data center capacity to enable innovation and to enable the digital economy, to draw out overlapping lines of responsibilities, to reduce frictions in the system, to make it more efficient, make it more effective, make it more secure, while we still retain privacy rights across the world. And on privacy, my final note, you may or may not have heard that Microsoft took the US government to court over the fact that the US government wanted us to release data of a consumer that had a Hotmail account in Ireland. And the way that we operate is, if the Irish authorities comes to us in Ireland, we would work with local law enforcement and we follow legal jurisdiction. But we took the US to court because they said, you need to hand over the data from your data center in Ireland to us here in the US. The similarity here is that means basically that a US police officer can go on an airplane and fly into Dublin and make an arrest and take the person out of the Irish environment and bring them back. And if every government did that, there literally are no legal jurisdictions anymore. We won the case. So we fight very hard to make sure that we work with local law enforcement and we make sure that we safeguard privacy, and we're really tough on security. And we want to do this, and make no mistake, we want to run down the learning curve as fast as we can, so the hyperscale cloud services that are being delivered are at the lowest cost, most secure, lowest cost. And you compare that to your existing environment, it becomes quite clear you're going to be on the journey, and we'd like to be on that journey with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are any questions, we can take one question at least.
How can Microsoft help in the smart cities movement that the government of India has launched, since your topic was digital transformation of cities?
Yeah. So back to the platform conversation. So we've worked with the 39 consultants that's been involved with 100 smart cities in India. We've worked with a number of independent software vendors to package solutions that sits on top of this platform, the Azure platform. So we work literally with just about almost every city in India, and the smart city, which is a big sort of investment for Microsoft across the world. I think the leadership that we've seen in India and the work we've done together with many of the consultants, the PwCs of this world, etc., is coming together very, very nicely. So the bold move that Prime Minister Modi have made in terms of defining the 100 smart cities, with very much an underpinning of that. And the Azure platform that I've been talking about is the platform of choice to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other question? One last, if any. So,
it's interesting to hear. Do we understand that all the smart city operation centers would be working on Azure platform, or there's another alternate choice also available to them?
Ultimately, each and every one of the RFPs that are now going out as a result of the consultants having made and built the requirements, there will be some which will be, on-premise world and may exist of Microsoft technology. It may be a cloud world. We'd like to present a mobile-first, cloud-first sort of vision from Microsoft, but we can work on-premise and we can work in the cloud. Of course, there are alternatives. There are other cloud offerings. There are local cloud offerings, etc. And we'll compete hard to make sure that we become the attractive platform from which Azure is sort of the vision of the future, at the same time as Windows Server, as you all know, has been around for a long, long time and sit in most data centers today.
Thanks.
Yeah.